worked with the traditional county walking list, and just after we explained that to our volunteers and got them going, in comes the Romney campaign with the Romney victory list, different questions, trying to reach different people in the same precinct for different reasons. I recognize a lot of the people as college students away in college without any indication that that's who they were. And I just think the national campaign imposing a top-down system will have a hard time getting work at the local level. And the traditional Republican apparatus has an outdated model. So the question is, at what level should data be managed and by whom? The candidate or the organization? And how ought that data management be to be effective?
Great question. Candidate. Yeah. Candidate. You have the tools right now to be able to do it, and it costs you less money than your television.
Right, the campaign comes and goes. I have no idea what happened to the Romney victory list. Who took all that information, whether it was ever melded into what the Republicans are trying to do?
I'd like to say that I used to be a chair of a district. In fact, we were the only district that picked up Jamie Herrera Butler. The only win was over Mississippi. We won that because we didn't care what people thought were doing. The 7 counties got together every single day. We did our own data. We had to sit and brainstorm. What's not working right? What are they trying to do? We took responsibility for our own data, and I always made copies of every little list that I ever had and gave back, because don't ever trust it's really going to mash into Voter Vault or Data Center or anything. You have to be responsible for your own data at your own precinct. You own it, and you have to be the one to go out there and just do it. And we can't depend top down and win elections. It's just not going to work.
I got to disagree with that, and Nansen and I are friends, so I feel comfortable doing that. But you know,
that's okay.
People at the local level get hit by buses and go move, and you can't rely on local people to maintain data. This, you know, a central system sounds like this big top-down socialist thing we should be afraid of, but through APIs and other technological means, it's actually quite easy to have a central data system that can communicate efficiently with local groups. And
but what do you have when you have a candidate at a state level who doesn't keep that data to use for future elections?
But that's the point, is that it shouldn't live with him. It should live at the RNC and the NRSC and the NRCC. And we all need to do it better at the national level.
And the reason that the RNC's voter file was so successful for as long as it was is because that's exactly the model that they employed. All of the data that was gathered for the RNC's voter file was gathered by us at the state party. You know, we went out and figured out that there's a tax exemption in New Mexico for veterans on their income taxes. And so we could go to the state and say, hey, we'd like a list of all the people who claimed that exemption. And the state gave it to us, and we appended that as our veterans file. That was how we figured out where every veteran in the state was, because they got a homeowner's exemption. And we sent that to the RNC. The RNC appended it to their voter file. They ran it through a whole series of other data enhancements, including telepins and, you know, who died and who moved, and then they sent it back to us. So the data was a constantly living, breathing thing. Candidates were doing the same thing. They were sending us the data. We'd send it up to the RNC. When we got the voter file back at the end of every cycle, it had every piece of data from every campaign, who was favorable to who. We had all of that information in the system. So the RNC was running that system. I think in some ways, and no offense to Chad here, but I think one of the problems that the RNC had was that they moved to Voter Vault, because I think that had they kept some semblance of that, they would have been much better off. But they instead, in my opinion, kind of dumbed down the whole idea of their data when they built Voter Vault. It was great that they gave it to people and had access to it, so in that way it was a fantastic resource for them. But on the other hand, it took the technologists out of the state party. There was no longer a reason to have a guy who understood data. There was no longer a reason to have a person who understood a database, because what you really needed was a guy who understood how to put data into an HTML form. And that wasn't a very effective tool. And I think that in some ways Voter Vault was very effective for what it did for a short period of time, but it really neutered our efficiency at gathering and collecting data and thinking in terms of data.
I think Chairman Alley put it correctly yesterday. I don't want to misquote you, Chairman Alley, but you said Voter Vault, quote unquote, sucked the life out of me, right? Every time I use it.
Yeah, it was actually using it sucks your will to live.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm the bad guy in the room at every one of these tech tabs. I think
It was a great idea at the time, it just, it unfortunately didn't hold up well. I mean, the idea behind giving the access to everybody at the state party level and allowing that data to be accessible to all was great. It just, unfortunately, it didn't age well, and as a result, it contributed to our tech efficiency.
Sure. So, go ahead, Shannon.
Really quick, I think one of the good news on this topic was, once again, in that conversation that was held on Thursday, it was a little bit in code, and I don't know if anyone else is there can clarify this for me, but I think I heard the Chief of Staff of the RNC, Mike Shields, commit to an open source data strategy, meaning that there would be a cooperation with a third-party data source that all of our coordinating organizations could tap into, including the local precinct level, all the way up to a presidential. And I'm fairly certain that's what he said, and maybe somebody else could clarify if it was there that day.
Anybody want to clarify or not clarify? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next topic.
Well, I work with Mike Shields at the NRCC, and I know him as someone who understands how to change organizations for the better. As he said at that meeting, that he's not a techie, or Eric Wilson just chided me for saying that, but he's not a tech person, but that's actually not what's needed at the top there. You need a manager who can empower technology people. And so I'm confident that Mike's going to do a great job.
All right, so we're gonna shift course in our remaining half hour here, breaking off with this question: if you were a social media platform, which would you be and why? That's from the audience.
I'll start. I'm Twitter. Everyone knows me. I live my life in 140 characters. Nansen on Twitter is my first name. I'm happy I have over 600,000 followers.
There's another follow-up question on that. How do you follow 600,000 people?
I used to try to follow everybody back, and it gets overwhelming. So I just don't stress on it. I don't really look at the numbers, because really what matters is engagement. What matters is persuasion and rapport. And if you're not connecting, it doesn't matter how many followers you have.
That's the truth. You know what? I agree with that, because when I first started, the message was kind of low, but when you get picked up by a couple of, let's say, Dana Loesch or Sean Hannity, and when people start really listening to you, they want to hear more of what you have to say. And I've even had concern. Now, to answer that question, Twitter is probably the #1 for me too. But I've had top dog people contact me and say, I like your message, I like how it's going, can you send people over to follow me? I'm like, I can't do that. I mean, I can send them over to say, to check you out, but if you don't have a message, they're not going to follow you. So you have to have that message, that ongoing message that they connect with, for them to say, you know what, I want to keep on following. But Twitter is probably my #1.
That's yours. Gerrit, what's your, if you were a social media platform, what would you be and why?
I guess I'd be Facebook, because they have name verification, like you have to be a real person to be on it, and so therefore you're more valuable for campaigns in order to identify voters.
Anton.
I'm going to go with Google+. I would hope you would go with Google+.
I'm going to sense there's going to be a strong Microsoft presence over here.
I mean, if you haven't used them yet, I think the Hangouts is an awesome feature that you don't see in other spots. And I was recently in Dubai and was on my phone on Wi-Fi and could hang out with people while I'm walking around.
They block FaceTime in Dubai, so
Oh.
it's Google Hangouts is awesome.
Thank you. So a note to the crowd, if you travel to Dubai, use Google+. Okay. Next up.
Based on the surveys that we run, I'd have to say Facebook. We do a lot of surveys into the mobile phone channel. Facebook is about a 52% opt-in rate in mobile phones. Twitter's only about 11% right now. So our focus is really the mobile phone channel, and what's happening with that. So I'd say the hangout right now for social media would be Facebook, or an alternative to that.
Shannon.
So I'm going to take the alternative approach. I would say that I would either be Dolphin or Xeeps or Elg or any of the other open source social media platforms, because we're actually an open source shop, and all of our software is built on that same strategy.
Okay. Over here, Nansen, already answered. Go.
I'd be the API that's connecting all the data that's coming through all the social media back up to the voter database.
I would do Skype, actually. I do a lot of international campaigns, and I love Skype because, you know, people know I'm online or when I'm not online, but just doing the video conferencing. And I've even told my staff now, we actually have branded Skype accounts, and we can do that, and that's pretty cool. So we do a lot of video chatting back and forth, and I found that very powerful.
Turk.
I don't know that I'd be a social network because I'm largely antisocial. I would probably say if I were a technology, I would be Reddit, because I've never met a meme I don't like, and there are parts of my personality that are slightly disturbing.
I think my knee-jerk reaction was Twitter, but I actually think it's Pinterest. And the reason is that's where my wife and my daughters are influenced. When I see what they're doing, it actually influences what they do and what they buy. And I think a way of getting into Pinterest without being overt, you know, without sort of having people recoil in abject horror that Republicans are